Welcome to the Recovery Report Live. My name is Matt Sangstrom, Senior Vice President of GlobalPro. Joining you here today, our founder and President Daniel Odess is actually enjoying some time off. He's over in Paris right now with his family, and I hope they're eating 50 or 100 croissants a day and 50 baguettes a day and sandwiches and all sorts of good stuff over in France. So hope you guys are watching. If you are, hi. Hope you're having a great time. See you back here soon. Today's going to be a great kickoff to 2023. We have Rob Bowlby, president from Texas, joining me here shortly. And I wanted to start off and kind of set the conversation, set the stage a little bit today. We want to go through some of the top lessons that we learned in 2022. Primarily, I think we're gonna be able to touch on both residential and commercial lessons that we learned. And I think this is going to be one of the episodes where you're going to want to kind of bookmark it and make sure you save it. If you haven't already, please subscribe, please like. And anytime you have questions or anything like that, please go ahead and put them in the chat. So to kind of get started here, let me bring on Rob. Rob, how are you, sir?
Good morning, Matt. I'm great. Good to see you.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you for joining us today. And hopefully we can get through all this information here. We have a ton of stuff to get through, and we'll try and get through all of it. But I wanted to kind of let you start off first. There's a bunch of topics here that we've gone back and forth on that you've written out here. Let me kind of first start again. This is going to be the top lessons learned during the first full year of GlobalPro Texas, and also the year where we had a couple different storms towards the end of the season, ending with Storm Elliott that just came through the last couple of weeks here. But I think one of the first things that you touched on, Rob, here, and you want to get into the discussion here. You get what you pay for. You get what you pay for, especially in residential. And if you want to take it away and kind of describe, what you mean by that and what you've learned this year in 2022.
Sure, happy to do that. And this topic was my idea because this was our first full year in Texas. And so one of the things I love about this job, besides the fact that we help restore property owners to their pre-loss condition, is every claim is unique. You learn something on almost every single claim. So I thought this first broadcast of the year would be some of the things we learned here in Texas that you guys, Matt, in Florida probably already know, but I think it's good to just reinforce for our viewers. So as you said, the first one is you get what you pay for. And what I mean by that is, about 50% of our claims in Texas were residential. And particularly on the residential side, it is a night and day difference when a homeowner has what I would call more a higher end boutique coverage. And by that, I mean pure insurance. I know they have a lot of policyholders in Florida and Texas. Vault is big in both of our Florida and Texas markets, and then Travelers has a good presence nationwide. But in both of those cases, in all of those cases, the adjusters came out and seemed to really worry about protecting the reputation of the company, doing the best they could by the property owner, and really working with us off of our estimates to help the property owner resolve the claim quickly. They had a dedicated rep assigned to it. We dealt with that rep throughout the entire process. And when we had those carriers involved, we generally settled the claims in sometimes less than 30 days, rarely more than 90 days. Versus when we're dealing with one of what I would call the mass market consumer carriers, such as Allstate, State Farm, Hippo is one of the newer ones. It's just a different experience. They send out generally a third-party adjuster. That adjuster writes an estimate and is not really willing to negotiate that estimate, and is not really that excited to look at your estimate and try to find some give and take there. Also, we found that in all of those cases, we dealt with 2, 3, sometimes as many as 4 different reps as the claim got handled off to claim rep versus claim rep versus claim rep, and you started over. So in many of those cases, those claims took more than 6 months to settle and frequently ended up in appraisal. Now, you guys know, particularly on the commercial side, we try to avoid appraisal because it elongates the process. But when you've got an adjuster that's not really willing to do anything other than, this is our amount, either accept it or, invoke your rights under the policy, there's not a whole lot we can do other than just help the policyholder invoke their rights under the policy. We still got great outcomes for all of these policyholders, but it was a much longer process than it needed to be.
Yeah, I bet, and that gives a little more anxiety, makes insured a little bit more nervous when you get to that place, and representing them is ultimately the most important part of that entire situation. It's something we do all the time here, obviously, right? So interesting, you this is one of the first lessons that you bring up. in throughout the years, and particularly this year, there's a cyclicality to the business, right? And so to draw a parallel and talk about this year in this regard, we had two storms back to back. Hurricane Ian was one of the biggest ever in the state of Florida, and I can tell you a lot of the things that you described, we saw right off the bat, unfortunately, with major catastrophic losses after a Cat 4 hurricane, came through, and I'm talking big commercial losses as well. And unfortunately, what we're seeing now in Florida is the right now today, this time period, Florida per licensing, right, is the lowest, has the lowest volume of adjusters in the state's history, and that's a problem. So what we saw right after Hurricane Ian were adjusters, independent adjusters, coming from all over the country. Texas, Minnesota, in particular, for whatever reason, I worked with a bunch of adjusters from Minnesota, folks from Oklahoma. I think one guy came from Idaho, and that's before we started hearing about folks coming from Canada and other places, other countries, which is completely, not, out of the ordinary, I guess is the best way to describe that, right? And so you kind of wonder, how all of the adjusters from other states can come here and still provide top quality service and the right adjusting, whether it's time and material and their estimates and things like that, or even, do they even, know what they need to do and are obligated to do per the Florida statutes and per the policies. I mean, it's a big, unfortunate, very confusing, very, very kind of misleading situation for most insureds unless they have representation, right? And so we can manage that. We handled it very well. And we know sometimes how to navigate these issues from all the experience that we have here. But certainly that's what we saw, on the commercial side as well. On the residential side, you mentioned the big, insurers, Allstate, State Farm, Hippo. Same thing. I can't tell you. It took us 5 to 6 weeks. I can't tell you how many adjusters we had to email, call, text repeatedly for some of these residential claims that we have. We got no response, no communication for weeks and weeks after the storm, unfortunately. And again, a lot of these folks are also hiring independent adjusters. And again, the level of service and the sense of urgency and things like that are greatly diminished, in today's cycle that we're in when it comes to adjusting claims and getting recoveries for our insurance. So hopefully that's something that'll be addressed, something that'll change, over time. That brings us kind of to the next, lesson here, which I think is a perfect follow-up, right? Call us first, right? How you file the claim, how you interact and engage with the insurance company and the adjuster, the independent adjuster in this instance, many instances, getting an estimate, getting evaluation of the damages, ultra important, obviously, in the grand scheme of things. But Rob, tell us about the first year of GlobalPro Texas, why that lesson's important. It's number 2, which is a great follow-up to you get what you pay for, obviously, right?
Yep. So you touched on the first part of it. Obviously, the call us first, and you guys have experienced this a lot more than I have, that the language you use in reporting a claim is really important, particularly when it comes to water damage. Those are the ones where there's a lot of intricacies to the policy as to what's covered and what's not covered. So just the language and the terms you use to report the claim are very important. And that's why we like to, whenever possible, be the one to report the claim. But the other part that I don't think I really had considered until I went through a year of claims, particularly on the commercial side, is particularly with these independent adjusters. First of all, these independent adjusters, adjustment companies that a lot of the insurers use, for the most part, I won't say there aren't exceptions, but they're pretty good guys and gals, and they want to help the homeowner. And so if you can be out there on that first inspection and you can come forward with an estimate, 9 times out of 10, they'll work with your estimate. And that's really helpful to the homeowner. Instead of you negotiating off of something, i.e. they've already prepared an estimate and you're trying to get them to include things or raise things up substantially, they'll take a look at your estimate. And if it's a reasonable estimate, and that's one thing we pride ourselves on, is not throwing everything but the kitchen sink in there to see what sticks. We really try to write a reasonable estimate as to what it takes to restore to pre-loss condition. I found the independent adjusters will generally go with that estimate. They'll say, hey, send me your ESX file. That's the software they use. And we'll start from there. And the whole process goes a lot quicker. So one thing we try to do now is when we get informed of a claim, we try to get out there and write an estimate as soon as possible and show that to the independent adjuster and try to get them to work off of our estimate. That's one of the advantages of calling us first.
I totally agree. I mean, again, it goes back to simple observation statement we made early on in the process, especially after Hurricane Ian, which was, hey, representation is of the utmost importance for little nuance issues and things like that need to be navigated. We have a tagline here. It's called manage risk to recovery. Remanage your risk to recovery as the insurance coverage experts that we are here at GlobalPro. And, to piggyback again off of that, I can't tell you how many times, we especially after a hurricane, because of the pure chaos and everything that's going on, obviously, and the timing of how that storm came through, a lot of the folks on the southwest coast of Florida, weren't here yet, right? They weren't here yet. The snowbirds, the folks that have second homes, they weren't here yet. So we were dealing with a lot of folks that weren't here. They didn't know the scope and the extent of the damage. And what happened often was they had already called their insurance company. They had already reported the claim. And innocently enough, right? Rob described before, the first notice of loss is very, very important. What you describe, the damages and loss that you describe to your insurance company sets the stage, the tone, it sets the narrative for the entire process. We always say less is more, and we are very specific about the language that we use because it should trigger policy coverage, and that's what we're here for. We're here to help out. And so, again, just pulling it back to an example. After Hurricane Ian, you'd think innocently enough that you call and you tell your insurer, hey, our property flooded, right? Our property was damaged by Hurricane Ian, and the windows blew out, and there's water, all over the first floor, and in the garage, and in the basement, and all over. But the fact of the matter is unless you have a specific flood policy, along with your property policy, what we found were a lot of IAs coming out saying, oh, this looks like flood. It was described as flood, and that's what we're going to say it is, and we're going to, there's no claim here. It's below deductible. In fact, in the first 8 weeks, I guess it's 8.5 weeks, the stats started to come out about the claims, the number of claims, where they were in the process, how many were denied or paid, and things like that. In the first 8.5 weeks, insurers denied almost 80,000 claims after Hurricane Ian. I mean, that is a tremendous amount of property owners, of insureds that had at that point no hope of recovery. So, we always say calls first, but the flip side of that is if you've been underpaid, right? If you've been underserviced and you haven't gotten anywhere with your insurer, I would argue to call us first now, if that makes sense, right? Call us first. Call us before you call an attorney. There's still a chance to adjust the claim, which would have to be done anyway, even if you decide to file suit. And let us get into the process, and at least if it ends up going to a lawsuit and you have to take action against your insurer, we've adjusted the claim, we've properly valued the damages, and we've also properly described the damages and allocated them properly to the right policy, if that makes sense, right? So that again dovetails into the next lesson here, which is about the rebuild part of the equation, right? And Rob, you want to get into kind of the commercial rebuild and your thoughts there and the lessons you learned in 2022 after a catastrophic event or loss or damage occurs?
Sure. So I call this one running concurrent processes as much as possible, because there's really two parts of the claim process from the policyholder standpoint. We tend to focus on how fast we settle claims, which is really important to us and also really important to the policyholder. But the policyholder only sees that as half the process. And then the other half of the process is getting the property back to pre-loss condition and operating, particularly when you're talking about income property, commercial office, multifamily, hospitality. And so one thing we learned is we want to run concurrent processes as much as possible. And what I mean by that is, particularly when you're dealing with older properties, there's a lot of stuff that has to happen that doesn't involve ready, recover, rebuild. I don't want to get ahead of us on that, because we always tell people don't start the rebuilding process until you have fully settled the claim with the insurance company. But there's a lot of pre-work that goes into that building process, such as getting your plans and specs up to compliance. If you have to go back for permitting, getting those through the city, all of those take weeks and sometimes months. And those can be done concurrently while we are adjusting the claim and getting you to settlement, so that once you've reached settlement with the insurance company, you can immediately start rebuilding the property. versus settling the claim and then you've got another 90 to 120 days while you go through the permitting process before you can start rebuilding the property. That's important for another reason, because a lot of times with these time element coverages, you're limited to 6 months or 12 months or some kind of extended period, and you don't want that coverage to run out before you've got the property fully restored. That's one point on that. The second point is early in the claim, figure out who needs to be on the team. We represent GlobalPro, but a lot of times we need forensic meteorologists, we need certified industrial hygienists, we need structural engineers. If we can figure out who those people are as early in the process as possible, put the insurance company on notice so that they can bring out their own expert or at least have the adjuster on site. We find that speeds up the process. Because a lot of times, and this will get into our fourth point of insurance companies will hold on to the money as long as possible, but we'll submit our expert report and they'll say, well, we need to get our own expert out there, but we can't get them out for the next 45 days. And that just delays money coming to the policyholder.
100%. And again, our job is to try to, advance payments as quickly as possible, meaning return cash flow to the insured, the association, whomever at that point. So you bring up another great point, and that again kind of dives into the next lesson here about insurance companies withholding the money as long as possible. I think one of the best things or best lessons I've learned in my career here is, if you can give them a reason and give them supporting documentation, it kind of backs them into a corner a little bit, and then they're obligated to comply and abide by the policy conditions and the statutes governing the state, and unfair claims practices come up at that point, things like that. So while sometimes it might seem that we're as a business model that we're going a little bit overboard on the claims process, in fact it's actually not. We're just ensuring that the client gets a better experience, and that they get the attention they deserve, and that they get the service they deserve from their insurer, and that the insurer complies and abides by the statutes, and also complies with their obligations under the policy as well. It's just leveling the playing field at the end of the day. And so speaking of that, when insurance companies do withhold the money as long as possible, and there is no cash flow coming, there's certain things that we can do as your advocate, as your representative. And Rob, get into some of that stuff. What did you learn this year that has made you more efficient, as an advocate for your insureds?
Sure. So I'm going to touch on both areas here, residential and commercial. And interestingly, on the residential side, it goes back to you get what you pay for. When we were dealing with some of those higher end boutique, they unsolicited offered to send what we call the undisputed amount. So, just to make it simple, if the insurance company thinks a claim's valued at $50,000 and our estimate's at $100,000, we both agree there's at least $50,000 worth of damage. And so the insurance company, those higher end claims would unsolicited be like, okay, well, we agree on this 50. We're going to go ahead and send the insured the check for this first 50,000. That never happened with the mass market consumer residential carriers unless we pushed them for it and said, hey, we agree with this amount. You need to give us this check. So that's on the residential side. On the commercial side, it was a little better on the undisputed amounts. I won't say they volunteered it every time. We usually had to ask for it, but they were willing to send it. And that gets money in your insured hands right away so that they can begin paying for some of those things like the professional fees, and they're not having to come out of pocket for those. But where we would see carriers really dig in is on the business income side. And what they would say frequently is, well, we don't want to deal with business income or personal property until we've settled the real damage claim. And, the policy doesn't say that anywhere. And particularly if you're a income producing property holder, you don't have income coming in every month when your building's down. And so one thing we pushed for early is, within 90 days of the claim being filed, you should be getting business interruption income paid to you quarterly. And in many cases, we've had to use our own form to file the proof of loss to force the carriers to do that.
Again, the benefits of having representation and the benefits of having the experience and pedigree of our team, advocating for the insured. So that was the next lesson here on the list anyway. So might as well dig in a little bit further if you have any more points. But in particular, to get in the weeds a little bit, calculating business income, calculating the period of restoration and when the business income kicks in. These time element coverages are not as cut and dry as some of the other coverages potentially, right? And so let's dig into that a little bit more. Are there any, there are two or three bullet points or rules of thumb that insured, whether residential or commercial, should follow if they have a business income loss? Did you learn anything that kind of gives you, again, more efficient ways of getting this paid?
Sure. So the business income, to the point you just made, Matt, there's usually very specific language about how the business income loss is calculated, whether it's a rental property, whether it's a small business operating. They have a very specific formula they use to make that calculation, which may or may not have a whole lot of relation to how you operate your business. And at the end of the day, the calculation is not going to be based on how you operate your business. It's going to be the calculation as it's defined in the policy. So the first thing I would recommend policyholders do is make sure they understand how that calculation is done. Now, in most cases, the carriers will farm that calculation out to a third party. And granted, we're 1 year in here, so we've seen a limited number of these claims. But I will say these third parties have been pretty fair on the calculations. We've used our internal team to check those calculations. I think if they get really complex, we have some forensic accountants of our own that we can outsource out to. But most of the time when our team checks them, we find these third parties treat the insured pretty fair, but they will follow the language of the policy. And what we've seen more recently, which has really hurt some of our small business owners, is there's a co-insurance provision. And you think of co-insurance mainly as it relates to real estate, i.e., if your house is worth $500,000, you need to have it insured for at least $400,000, or we're not going to give you a full payout on your coverage. But more and more, we're seeing carriers put co-insurance language into business income. And again, the amount of insurance you have to carry is determined by the way they calculate your business income, not the way your actual business income is. And we've seen a couple small businesses get really, really burned by that because they thought they had enough coverage, and it turned out the way the policy calculated it, they really only had about 25 or 50% of the coverage they actually needed, which dramatically reduced their payout.
Yeah, it's unfortunate you don't find out about that until something happens, unfortunately, right? So that's a very, learning that lesson early on is I think one of the most impactful things that could have happened. So, and you having a financial background like myself, we're kind of more, I guess I would say, we're a little bit more comfortable with this. I'm more used to stuff like this at the end of the day from a coverage perspective. It is not as easy as most people would think, right? So, okay. And with that being said, there's the last kind of lesson here that we wanted to discuss today kind of wraps everything and puts it into a little bit more of a perspective when it comes to the adjustment process, I think, right? So you have here push on everything and document every contact. So seems like something small, but I agree. One of the biggest lessons of 2022 for me, I started writing everything down. I started taking notes on my phone. I started writing as much as I could so I could remember it all without having to remember it, if that makes sense, right? Because you never know when some little bit of information or an interaction with an adjuster or an examiner or whomever on the other side of the table, right, leads to a chance to prevail on an issue of coverage or anything like that, right? So I've gotten into the habit of writing everything down, taking notes on my phone right away, emailing myself notes of things, and in particular, even the smallest things I'm starting to write down and to note. And you have here, again, push on everything and document every contact. So how did that come about this year? Was there a specific instance? Is there a process you've put in place to make sure and ensure that you're getting all that information, even the smallest of pieces of information?
Well, one thing we learned, particularly dealing with the mass market carriers, as I mentioned earlier, they keep reassigning claims. So then we had to recreate the entire process when we went to our second or third or fourth rep. And that's where it became really important to document everything. And, I'm willing to give the carriers a little bit of the benefit of the doubt. I know a lot of people think it's intentional, and there's a good chance that it is intentional. They like to hold on to the money as much as possible, but I'll chalk it up to just bad culture and not good processes in place. But we tend to, early in the process, email people about once a week to see where they are on it. As we get further into the process without response, we do that kind of every 3 days. And then at some point, we start emailing every day. Probably the best instance of that is we had a hippo claim where it started in July and they said no coverage. And we fought kind of weekly and then bi-weekly and then daily. And all of a sudden, I remember it clearly. I got a call the day before Thanksgiving from our fourth rep that said, "You have coverage." And so it was a lesson learned that you just keep pushing, and you keep pushing that same chain of documentation back. Here's what we submitted. Here's the 50 emails we've sent over the last 90 days asking for coverage for this insured who has dutifully paid his premiums for the last 5 years. And you'll eventually get there. And as you know, if for some reason you don't get there, and very few of our cases end up in litigation, but if you need to go to litigation, it makes the attorney super happy when you've got a really well documented chain of communication.
I agree, and it's being consistent in the I would call those the fundamentals of adjusting and representing our clients that get us the success and get us to the prevailing settlements that we have achieved and earned for our clients over the past decade, and now in GlobalPro Texas as well. So thank you very much, Rob. I mean, if there's anything else you want to add, by all means. I think that was a very in-depth discussion. To reiterate, those were great lessons learned. We can always expand and improve upon all these lessons. They always give us another chance to perfect our craft. And just like you, because I know you very well, right? You're always reading. You're always a student of the game. We're going to continue on our end to do that as well. And these are the types of discussions and conversations that we'll continue to have here on the Recovery Report Live to ensure that we're at the top of our game for our clients and our insurers, our policyholders all the time. So anything else you want to add before we sign off here, Robbo?
Nope. I just want to say a big thank you to our North Texas community. We just feel great about our first year here. We feel like we've been welcomed really well in the business community. We want to thank our clients who trusted us with their claims, that we feel really proud of the outcomes we've achieved for them. And we couldn't have done any of that without the support of the GlobalPro office in Florida. So Matt, thanks to you, thanks to Dan, Renee, Josh, the entire team down there has just been a huge lift to us and help us achieve a first great year in Texas.
Well, thank you. We're all here. We're all a big team, big family, and we'll continue supporting each other. To jump on that, I can't ever emphasize enough all the help that you provided, you and Lauren, when Hurricane Ian hit. For us, our team, our insureds, our policyholders, all the community associations, business owners that we helped throughout that time period. Those first 8 weeks, as you know, were completely chaotic, and we were able to rein everything in, get organized, and get moving for a lot of our insureds right away. As advocates for them. So thank you, and thank you to Lauren and the whole GlobalPro Texas team, and we'll continue building, as we get through the next couple of years here. All right?
Thank you.
Appreciate it. We'll see you soon. Take care. All right, just to wrap everything up, thank you so much for joining us today on the Recovery Report Live. I hope you guys take those lessons and all that information and use it to your benefit, to your advantage. You can always call Rob or myself. Obviously, Dan is also available. Our team is always ready to assist. And we are always, again, studying, learning, reading, trying to stay at the top of our game so that we can always ensure that we are helping our policyholders and insureds at any given moment. I think to wrap up some of those lessons into one, I think one, calls first. Calls first. I mentioned it before. We're always available. Would be happy to talk you through any situation or incidents or occurrence that you may be going through, and hopefully we can help you out and assist you as your advocate. Two, with that being said, I would argue that if it's not us, you need to find representation most often, especially during a catastrophic event or after a catastrophic event. Get properly noticed to the insurance company, get a proper evaluation, create a sophisticated claim file, and get it off to the insurance company and maximize and get fully indemnified for the damages that have occurred. And third, communication is key. I think, again, to reiterate what Rob said, one of my biggest lessons this year was communication, right? There's a lot of different perspectives in throughout different conversations that people walk away with. And sometimes you might have said something that meant one thing, and the person you're speaking to took it a different way, and frankly, you guys are not on the same page, which leads to a delay. It leads to not getting paid. It leads to describing a certain type of damage or loss the wrong way. I mean, there's all these things that can happen. So communicate. I'm always learning better ways to be more communicative, better communication, along with being more clear and concise and things like that. Obviously, if I could speak better, that would be certainly a way to do that. But I think those are kind of the three ways to wrap up many of the lessons that we learned last year. Call us first always, right? make sure you have representation after a catastrophic event, and communication is key here. So thank you again for joining us on the Recovery Report Live. We hope to see you guys again next week right here, same time, same channel, on the GlobalPro YouTube channel. Please like, subscribe, take a look at our social media, Instagram, Facebook, and of course, follow us on LinkedIn. I hope Dan is back next week. We'll have an even better start to the year with all of us here on the Recovery Report Live, and we're bringing you more information to inform, update, and educate you as much as possible, as always, okay? Have a great start and a happy new year. We'll see you guys soon. If you need us, please give us a call, 855-487-7475. Again, thank you very much for joining us here on the Recovery Report Live. See you soon.